Hey everyone, I just wanted to start this video off by saying that I had to say something about what we're going through at the moment, obviously the coronavirus. I just wanted to say that it's so important that we look out for each other, that we think about people that are on their own, that we think about people who are maybe elderly or in need of just extra support. And I really think it's a time to use the internet in a really positive way. And that positive way can be in so many different ways. I don't know if you've seen Italy, they're all out on their balconies singing songs, singing the national anthem and things like that. And I just want to say to our National Health Service here, you're amazing. I have friends that are nurses and doctors. There's Lee, there's Kelly, there's Darren, there's Michael, who's a doctor in America, and just everybody else that's doing that kind of work and that's caring for the vulnerable, weaker members of our community. And just to say well done. And I've decided to do a video every week while this is going on, so I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing for you, but I'm hoping it's a good thing. So let me know what you want me to talk about, what you need at this time. And now it's time to get back to normal viewing, and yeah, you know what comes next. That's right, this. So hello everybody and welcome back to Hart Talks. Today I am doing another episode of Sharing Stories, and I was going to say I have a guest, but I'm actually in Jonathan's house. He's invited me in for a cup of tea. Yes. So we're just sitting here having a gab. This is Jonathan Blake.
Hello.
Hello to Jonathan, and
hello to you.
Yeah, and Jonathan, to me, you're one of those HIV warriors,
Wow.
Because, I think we hear stories, and we hear these stories of people who, fought and did what had to be done, in a time that was very different. If you want to give our viewers a 1-minute summary of who you are.
Wow. A 1-minute summary. My name's Jonathan Blake. I started off my adult life as an actor, and I'd been to drama school. I joined the business. I was really lucky. My first job, I had 12 months as an acting ASM at Derby Playhouse.
Right.
So it was a really great kind of apprenticeship.
Yeah.
And I worked as a jobbing actor for about 11, 12 years. And there were better days, there were worse days. And in 1982, in October 1982, every single gland in my body had erupted. I was walking like a gorilla. I was living in the East End. I'd been working at Joe Allen's during a period of being out of work. Was laid off because I had been working there for 12 months, more than 12 months. I got sick pay.
Right.
And I got holiday pay, but
right.
I got sick pay, which was amazing.
Yeah.
Went to see my GP. She stood up as I walked in the room as a gorilla, and she said, "Shake my hand." And as I gave her my hand to shake, she felt the lymph node that was there, that was huge and was painful. And I went, "Ow, what did you do that for?" And she said, "That's the sailor's handshake. If ever the sailors went into port, they would shake the hands of the women or the men they were going with. And if that lymph node was enlarged, they wouldn't go with them. It was a sign of syphilis." So she said, "Why don't you go down to the special clinic and get yourself checked out for syphilis?" Which I did. I got myself checked out for syphilis. They took me in. They wanted to do a biopsy because they were so huge. put me into a side ward, and after 3 days came back with the result. I had HTLV3, which is what it was called. It was an incurable virus. They had nothing for it. It was terminal, and I was 33 years old.
So you were 33 years old. It was 1982.
1982.
And you'd been given a terminal diagnosis.
Yeah. And, you know, they said there would be palliative care. We have a National Health Service, which was, you know, is amazing and has been amazing.
Yeah.
And that has, in a way, helped keep me alive.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was nothing. That was it. I was totally winded.
Yeah. And in 1982, what did you know about HIV?
Well, it was interesting. You see, I had lived in New York for about 10 months in 1974.
Right.
I first went to New York in 1972.
Right.
Which was amazing. So I had friends in New York. I had a very dear friend who I had lived with in London. He was a copywriter. He'd been headhunted. He lived in San Francisco. A very good friend of mine, Deborah Hauer. She was from Berkeley outside San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
She was getting married. She wanted all her friends from London to come. And there's a big thing in the States, certainly with Jewish weddings, that you have ushers.
Yes.
So she had this range of all her sort of her male friends, mainly gay.
Mainly gay, yeah.
As ushers in San Francisco. So in February 1981, I went to San Francisco for her wedding. My friend George was living there, so I went to stay with him. Had 2 weeks in San Francisco. He showed me around, so that's great that you get to see what the city is like.
Yeah.
And it was still, you know, the sort of, although there was unease, there wasn't, at that point, there hadn't really been the kind of great explosion.
The fear hadn't set in.
The fear hadn't set in.
Yeah.
And places were still open. And I have always loved bathhouses.
Yeah.
Serious steam bathhouses. I got to know them when I was in New York.
Yeah.
You know, if ever people couldn't find me, they always knew I was
They knew
at the
you were
other
in the
end.
bathhouse.
That was it. But anyway, you know, so sort of I love bathhouses. So I went to the bathhouse in San Francisco. And as I worked out recently, and it's only been recently that I kind of worked it out, that's where I met my virus.
Yeah.
So February 1981. And, you know, it's 15 to 18 months sort of incubation before you sort of necessarily seroconvert. October 82.
So you were given a terminal diagnosis in October 82. What did you do? What, you know, I just can't imagine where you go from there.
I had kind of begun to cut myself off from friends. I'm not very good when I'm unwell.
Yeah.
So I had sort of begun to kind of not get in touch with people. So I was basically living in this beautiful Peabody flat in the East End in Shadwell. In the December of that year, because I'd been hearing what was happening in the States, by this time there was a lot more information that was coming, not just in sort of newspapers, but, you know, I was keeping in contact, you know, by phone, because there weren't.
We didn't have the same forms.
There are no. You know, it's really
These are in the days before all that.
The days before, exactly. But, you know, I had heard really what there was, you know, around the corner from me, and it seemed pretty unpalatable. Mm-hmm. And so I decided I was going to commit suicide. I was going to take my life. I was going to do it I decided I was going to do it the Roman way.
Very dramatic.
Yeah, so I was going to sort of, you know, run a hot bath, take some sleeping pills, a lot of booze, and slit my wrist and just bleed out.
Yep.
But suddenly I heard the voice of my mother, Golda, in my head.
What was she telling you?
You clear up your own mess. You don't leave it for other people to clear it up. And I was thinking, this is going to be one hell of a mess. So I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
But then, I'm a nice Jewish boy. So you basically, l'chaim, life, you've got to get on and live.
Yeah.
But, saying that is easier than said. I have this killer virus that is coursing through my veins. I do not want to infect anybody else. What you do? And so I would go off to gay bars and I would stand in corners in the dark, wanting to meet people, but actually not wanting to meet people because what are you going to say? Oh, hello, I'm Jonathan, and I'm riddled with.
You must have felt radioactive.
It was absolutely. It was worse. I mean, I remember sort of when I'd been at drama school and I had Hep B, and those eyes go that extraordinary kind of sulphur yellow, and you're like a sort of beacon.
Yeah.
And I remember kind of sort of. There's nowhere to hide. And I kind of was thinking, this is even worse. But there aren't any signs, are there? But, so I basically hid in corners, as I say, wanting to meet people, but not. Anyway, I happened to pick up a copy of Capital Gay.
Right.
And I remember flicking through it, and there was this tiny little advertisement for Gays for a Nuclear-Free Future. We're running a coach from Gays the Word on Marchmont Street on the 1st of April 1983, All Fool's Day. And everybody was welcome. And I thought, all right, that is going to be my re-entry into society. I'm going to go. So I remember kind of, getting myself together and sort of, girding up my loins and really kind of deep breaths, and out I went. And I remember I arrived at Russell Street tube station. I came out of Russell Street and I could see the coach
dead ahead
up
of
at
you.
the top.
Yeah.
And I thought, what the fuck am I doing here? And I was about to turn on my heels and leave. And from nowhere, I heard this voice say, "Hello, my name's Nigel. Who are you?" And I turned round, and there was this guy who was wearing a feral sweater. He had got this mop of black curly hair. He was wearing ochre and crimson pantaloons and green Wellington boots. And that was Nigel Young.
That was
And
Nigel.
I said, "Oh, I'm Jonathan." And we just started talking, and he took me up, and we spent the whole day on the bus. It was amazing. So the bus was going to join this stand together around Greenham Common, Burfield and Aldermaston. So Burfield and Aldermaston, the two British nuclear establishments, and of course Greenham Common, the American Air Base. And we actually formed this, I think it was a 10-kilometre human chain, all holding hands around it. And then at the end of the day we got back on the coach, and I thought I was going to know nobody on the coach. And I didn't, and Nigel was introducing me to all his mates who were there. But Noel Gregg of Gay Sweatshop was on, and I knew I knew sort of Noel sort of from theatre.
Yeah.
Not, I'd not worked, sadly, with the company, but so he was living in a squat in West Hampstead, and he said, "Everybody back for an impromptu party in West Hampstead." So we left, Nigel and I still just rabbiting away, chat. And then the next day I had invited him back to my place in the East End. He was living in a squat in Fleet Road, near the Royal Free. So I said, "Why don't you come and have tea at my place in Shadwell?" So he arrived with a bunch of anemones and some jam donuts. So he brought the cakes. And we're sitting there chatting, and he said, "Look, you're living really isolated here in the East End. I live in North London, but I know of a squat in Brixton. why don't we move in together? And I thought, why not? I'm going to be dead next month.
Yeah. And tell everybody how many years ago that was.
Oh, God. Well, I can't remember, about 38 years. It's 37.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
It's crazy. So I knew of Jonathan through Twitter and Facebook. I knew his activism work that he was doing. So, but it wasn't until a couple of months ago I went and heard Jonathan. He was speaking at an event. And I hope everybody that's watching has seen the film Pride. It's a wonderful film, British film that was done with an amazing cast. And the story always got me, you know. I remember sitting with a friend and the two of us watching Pride and just being in tears, just because it's such an emotional, amazing story.
What's this? Don't those women ever sleep? God, that takes me back.
And all of a sudden, I realised that one of the characters, the character played by Dominic West, was based on this man here. So that was amazing, Jonathan, to see. Well, it was amazing for me to see that story being played out. How was it for you?
You know, I mean, it was weird. It was strange. It was strange, and I remember kind of sort of watching it. They were going to screen it at the Cannes Film Festival, so they decided they would have a screening for us before it went off. So that was 1 May, and I'm sitting watching it, and actually I've kind of got the weight of all those people that are no longer with us, because there were quite a number of members of lesbian and gay men support the minors who died from HIV/AIDS.
Yeah.
And so they were kind of sitting on my shoulder, and it was like a sort of weight, the fact that they're not there.
Yeah.
And at the very end of it, there was this caption that came up. And it was almost like I was the only person that was ever diagnosed with HIV and blah, blah, blah. And I just thought, you can't say that, Stephen, you can't. And all I could think of was, I've got to get hold of Stephen and just tell him.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, look, you can't, that is too overblown. You know, I am not that, you know.
Yeah.
Please, sort of, it needs to be toned down. And that was that. And then I said, but, you know, also, there's so much going on, I need to see it again. So he said, that's fine. We're going to have a screening for the cast and crew at the Curzon.
Yeah.
Come along. So I then went to see it the second time, and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just able to get into it. And, you know, he understood the politics of it. I mean, it's a really interesting story about how that came about, but that's for another time, another blog. But he was really true to us, to what we were doing. He understood the politics, and I think it's amazing.
Yeah,
and there is, you know, he wanted to have the story of a young man coming out, and that's the character of Bromley.
Yeah,
so Bromley is completely made up, and we never experienced any problems. I mean, it's really interesting. Sian James, who became the MP, extraordinary woman, she told us, and this is only about 5 or so years ago, that they had received a letter. It wasn't a phone call, it was a letter. So a letter was sent to them, and they then had a meeting, and, you know, to decide whether or not they would accept our money. And there were all the sort of batty boy jokes that came out, and eventually they stopped and they thought, what are we doing there? You know, this is a group of people, you know, or a community that when Mao Zedong finished the Long March, they sent a telegram to him congratulating him on finishing it. In the 20s, when the mines were privately owned, there was a strike, and the mine owners brought in a group of Galician miners to break the strike. And when the Galician miners realised that they'd been brought in to break the strike, they joined the strike.
Right.
And so there is a group of cottages called Spanish cottages
Right.
in memory of these people,
Okay.
and that's where they lived.
Right.
So they have an incredible kind of political history and understanding.
Yeah.
And so they decided that they would take our money, and that anybody who wasn't comfortable with that should, keep a distance. They would know when we were coming down.
Yeah.
So for them to just keep away.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it was dealt with. So there were no issues. We were so nervous
Yeah,
going down there.
Well, I can imagine. I can only get what I get from the film, but in real life, it must have been.
And in real life, there were 2 hackneyed community transport vans and an old clapped out VW. So there were about 30 of us.
Right.
I mean, Stephen Barris had said that the budget wouldn't run.
It wouldn't run that much. Yeah.
To that. So, but it was amazing.
Yeah.
And of course, for me, it was even more amazing because one of the things that I decided, my way of dealing with my diagnosis, was that if I could keep busy, keep doing things, I could outrun the virus.
Yeah.
Because the more I kept busy, I wasn't thinking about it, I wasn't dwelling about it.
Too busy to die.
So, too busy to die, absolutely.
Yeah.
And kind of that was my way of dealing with it.
Yeah.